with Paul Harrell.
We have Congressman Rick Crawford on the line. Rick, welcome back, sir. Thanks, as always.
Hey, you do this all the time on Friday, so I'm listening to your bumper music, and I'm getting into Johnny Cash, and then you make me talk.
I know. Well, you know what I was thinking? We always say with Johnny Cash Friday, we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news of the day. And you're the news. And oftentimes people, oftentimes when I get to the news, they're like, oh, we want to listen to more Johnny Cash. And so, yeah, it's kind of a disadvantage sometimes,
Yeah.
to be on during that day. Hey, let me ask you this, Rick. Your band, Triple Nickel, do you guys ever do any Johnny Cash covers?
Yeah, a couple. Yeah, of course, everybody does, Folsom Prison Blues, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You kind of got to do that. But, yeah, we do a couple, yeah.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah.
Well, so what's going on, Rick? Are you in D.C. now?
I am. Yeah, we are in session today, and it's approach season, so it's a busy time of the year when we're trying to get, basically get all the bills paid, for the next fiscal year. And believe it or not, I mean, we're making good progress on our approach bills. We're on schedule, on track, and everything. And we want to understand the Senate's actually doing something for a change. And so, that's good news. We're on track to maybe get these things done.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, and that's how long has it been since we've actually kind of had regular order when it comes to the budgeting process?
1994, I think.
Oh gosh!
I mean, you got to laugh to keep from crying. It's really kind of sad. But yeah, as I understand it, 1994 was the last time that we got all 12 appropriations bills through both chambers, conferenced, and signed. So what we end up with is sometimes a portion, we get a few of them done, then we do an omnibus appropriations bill as a catch-all to clean up, or something like that. And what we've seen so much of in the last few years is these continuing resolutions. And so, I'm hoping that'll change this time around.
Yeah. I've been following a little bit of, what's going on with the trade. And I know we had you on maybe a couple months ago talking about, these different tariffs and things like that. Are there any new developments, any new concerns that you have with what's going on?
Yeah, I think there's really kind of something that escaped my attention, but really I think it's worth sharing, and that is that if you view the tariffs in the context of tax reform, what that means. And so what we're seeing is that because of our tax reform, because now we are a more competitive market in the global space, because we have fewer U.S. businesses wanting to locate offshore, and because we have more U.S. businesses that are located offshore, either coming back or repatriating their dollars to invest in the United States, it's empowering our economy, and the effect that it's having on the Chinese economy is really it's a pretty chilling effect. And so if you combine that with tariffs, this is why China is in a panic about tariffs. And so when we say tariffs, from the trade standpoint here in the United States, people tend to freak out and they tend to panic. And thinking back to my ag econ class at Arkansas State University, tariffs were inherently bad. We can't do tariffs because that's bad for U.S. agriculture. But then at the same time, we talk about terms like inelastic or elastic demand. Well, the demand in China is decidedly inelastic. They have to have soybeans, and there's only a certain number of them out there, and we're a top 3 exporter. And so, in the short term, what you've seen is a drop in the price. But what's taking place now is these countries are scooping up U.S. soybeans, and we haven't even gotten to harvest yet. So I think what you're seeing is that there's a really incredible amount of pressure on the Chinese economy. I think they have been, sort of what I call economic saber rattling now, and have done for quite some time. They're a belligerent actor economically. They're a belligerent actor militarily, politically, and otherwise. And so, it's really about time that we decided, hey, we're going to get in the war too. Quite frankly, China has been at war with us for at least 20 years. Ever since they've been in the WTO, you'd think that would have somewhat of a stabilizing effect in terms of our relationship with China. But in fact,
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us. It's Wednesday. It's Hump Day, so welcome to the program. You don't have, we don't have much to go here before we get to the weekend. The phone number 870-275-9799. If you want to contribute to the program today, that's 870-275-9799. Let's see here. Also broadcasting over at facebook.com/Conduit News. We do have a great show for you. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we're going to be talking about a court case with Mr. Chuck Clifton of the Patriots of Act 746. Has to do with the Greenbrier man. And we've covered this briefly about a guy who had a gun in a vehicle, was charged with carrying a weapon because there's some debate on the intelligence of this, but he was stopped and he wanted to make the officer feel comfortable, so he took his gun out and unloaded it and put it on the dash because that's what law enforcement and his family had told him to do. And, of course, the officer heard the slide go back, and then, anyway, it was all a big misunderstanding. Well, they had a hearing yesterday, I imagine, and so we're going to talk to Chuck Clifton, who was at that hearing, coming up at the bottom of this hour. Then we'll talk a little bit about some interesting developments. Yesterday on the program, for example, we told you about Governor Asa Hutchinson's transformation agenda when it comes to the Department of Agriculture, specifically the Arkansas State Plant Board. He has tried 2 previous times to essentially consolidate power in this way, and it's failed. And this is the 3rd attempt. Well, when we got off the air yesterday, after doing that segment, had a few sources contact me and tell me that the director of the Arkansas State Plant Board, Terry Walker, took an early retirement. And now early is a subjective term, but I'll give you the story coming up at 7 o'clock today. Then at 7:33, we'll be talking with Cato Institute scholar Mr. Trevor Burrus. We're going to be talking about the new rules concerning some nonprofits not having to disclose donors, which is a good thing for freedom of association. It's a good thing for the First Amendment. Trevor is a research fellow at the Cato Institute, at the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies and Center for Study of Science. He's also the managing editor of the Cato Supreme Court Review. His research interests include constitutional law, civil and criminal law, legal and political philosophy, legal history, and the list goes on. Again, Trevor Burrus with the Cato Institute on the program at the bottom of this hour. Let's start with the big headlines, though. This is frustrating because I don't know if you guys have heard, but Trump's former lawyer, Cohen, his lawyer, so Cohen's lawyer, who is an associate of Bill Clinton, right? What's his name? Lanny something or other. Anyway, they leak a tape, or they give the tape of President Trump and, he was in candidate Trump, and his lawyer, Michael Cohen, talking about a payment that has to be made to a Playboy model. And so CNN, of course, has this huge news and this big development about something that happened 10 years ago that was discussed in 2016, but it's something that happened 10 years ago. And it's a recording relaying to Trump the need to register a company, quote, for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David, believed to be American Media Inc. president and Trump ally David Pecker. According to the Associated Press, quote, the conversation between Trump and Cohen came weeks after the National Enquirer's parent company reached a $150,000 deal to pay the former Playboy model for her story, and then, of course, they never published it, which apparently is common in these types of things, keeping things secret and that sort of thing. But here's the thing. If you actually listen to this tape, which there's really nothing, you can't really even hear a lot of it. There's not, and it talks about cash. We need to make a cash payment. No, we're not going to make a cash payment. And it's Donald Trump talking with his attorney. First of all, this concept of attorney-client privilege is apparently non-existent now, as far as I can tell. But Alan Dershowitz, can you throw this article up here? It's the Breitbart article that says Dershowitz, no crime in the Trump-Cohen tapes. So Alan Dershowitz, a Harvard law professor, went on CNN, and he said, quote, I don't know why anybody waived the lawyer-client communication regarding this tape. Here you have the client maybe saying, let's pay cash. The lawyer says, no, do it by check. And the client comes back and says, I'll do it by check. That's a typical conversation. I've had the conversation a dozen times with clients, and you persuade them to do the right thing. But I think the big picture here is, number one, Lanny is a terrific lawyer. This is the guy now representing Cohen. And so there is a real lawyer who is now against Trump, unlike Avenatti. And some of the others, a really, really good lawyer, blah, 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 blah. He goes on. The second paragraph there. This is all political. There is no crime here. The worst case scenario, take everything Lanny Davis says is true. There's no crime. There's no federal. This is no impeachable offense. This is all about how the president looks in the court of public opinion, whether or not he, through his lawyer, said something that is not true. I think they will win that fight because the tape's ambiguous enough so that there will be people who will hear it the way they want to hear it, and other people who will hear it the way they want to hear it. Now, does that last sentence there from Alan Dershowitz, does that not describe the whether or not you are a fan of what President Donald Trump is doing versus not a fan of what President Donald Trump is doing? Does that not describe like the whole country right now? You're just going to see things the way you're going to see them. You're going to hear things the way you're going to hear them. Does that not describe the country right now? It seems to me that that's exactly the way it is. Because you see, people, if you don't like Donald Trump, then of course you're gonna take every little thing, and I'll tell you something else. This is about public opinion. That's all this is. This is an attempt to bring Donald Trump's poll numbers down. And but I will caution you. I will caution you, conservatives out there, and I put myself in that as well. Limited government conservatives or Republicans or whatever you want to call yourself. Today, you're going to have friends who are anti-Trump, who do nothing but listen to CNN, watch CNN. They think that they don't understand the media is trying to control them. They don't understand this. And if they do, they think, well, there's some people that think, well, there's no way that I can be controlled by a media outlet or any sort of propaganda. And that's naive, by the way. You should never think that. Because you can frame information any way you want to. You're going to be called a hypocrite today if you agree with the president on what he's doing. If you voted for the president and you're a conservative or Republican, there's inevitably, probably, you're going to run into somebody today, if you talk politics, that's going to try to call you a hypocrite because of the moral aspect of adultery, the immoral aspect of adultery. Because 10 years ago, Donald Trump apparently was engaged in adultery. How could you? This is what you're going to hear. I'm just preparing you. It's 6:14 this morning, and I'm preparing you for what you're going to hear today. How could you? What a hypocrite. How could you claim to be a Christian and vote for Donald Trump after what he's done? Now, first of all, that is an excellent opportunity. Hear me out. If you, in fact, are a Christian, to tell someone about the gospel. One time, sometimes I like the sometimes I like to look at church marquees. I find that very amusing sometimes. Sometimes people have a lot of fun with church marquees. One of the best ones I ever heard, which was, does life stink? Well, we have a pew for you. I thought that was pretty funny. But I did see one time that said, hypocrites meet here every week. And that's exactly true and correct. So anyway, when that person says something to you, maybe it'll be a great time to actually tell them this concept of that everybody misses the mark on all sorts of all across the moral spectrum, if you will. That's the first thing. But the second thing, then, I would remind them. I would say this. Well, this is what you're going to hear today. But I would say, I would ask that person: did President Donald Trump run as the moral standard? Did he run? Let's just contrast how Ted Cruz ran his campaign, the public face he put forward, versus President Donald Trump, who used very colorful language the entire time he campaigned in 2016, and was just not afraid to just kind of hey man, we're going to cut the BS here, and we're just going to get right down to it. I mean, that's his style. That was his style. It's what made him stand out, because he did come across as not a conventional candidate at all. He's very anti-status quo. So it would be one thing. You would have an argument if President Trump had run as some sort. Did anybody out there, when your choices were Trump or Hillary, did anybody out there think, well, you know what, I bet Donald Trump has never, ever had an affair? I mean, this guy has been a millionaire, billionaire his whole life. That doesn't excuse it, but you understand the type of lifestyle and the type of, let's just say, opportunities that would present themselves. You know what I mean? And again, it doesn't excuse it, but did anybody actually think that wasn't in the realm of possibilities when you cast your vote for him? Of course you did. You were voting for, at the time, what was the lesser of two evils, and President Trump has been a great president so far in terms of what he's actually accomplished. Saudi Arabia recognizes Israel's right to exist. The Korean Peninsula might be denuclearized. When it's all said and done, it looks like Iran, maybe, who knows what's going to happen with that. But there's some huge things that are done. The tax reform, the stuff, calling NATO for what it is, going over to London and actually speaking truth about the Brexit process to the London people or the people of UK. The trade stuff, which is certainly unconventional from a Republican standpoint. It's very, very interesting to see what's going on here. But did anybody think that Donald Trump had never made a mistake or made what society rightfully says is, one of the mistakes that you don't make at all, that's very taboo, which is adultery? Yeah, I think that's what's being lost in this argument here. And this is why the media still really doesn't know how to handle Trump. They don't understand why Donald Trump still is successful and still continues to beat the rap, so to speak. That's because he didn't come across as some golden boy. You know what I mean? He didn't come out and say that he was perfect. Well, he did, but not in the context, not in the traditional political American sense of there's nothing to see here. I have no skeletons in my closet. I think everybody knew Donald Trump was going to have skeletons in his closet. The man was in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, for goodness sake. Did you know that? Did you know that, Joe? Did you ever watch Home Alone? Home Alone movies are good. They really are. But Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, the main character there, he's in the Plaza Hotel. Got his dad's credit card. Anyway, Donald Trump has a cameo in that. Yeah. Anyway, so let me know what you think about this. I'll read some of your Facebook comments during the break and see if we want to read any of those on the air. Again, we got a great show for you. Hey, when we come back, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Satanic Temple now arguing that they should be added to the lawsuit against the state of Arkansas and the Ten Commandments monument. They want a monument. We'll talk about that story when we come back. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. We'll be back in just a moment.
It hasn't, because the WTO allows them to get away with a lot of shenanigans, like, for example, manipulating their currency. They refuse to, they float their currency for their own benefit so that they can improve their buying power and decrease our buying power. So it's not a two-way street. It's not fair. It's not all just about trade. It's about monetary policy. It's about tax policy. And all of these things combined seem to be coming to a head right now. And at the end of the day, what we need to understand is China has to have us in a variety of ways, and it's certainly true with soybeans. They have to have U.S. soybeans. They just can't get along without them. So whether or not we sell directly to China or is really not the question. U.S. soybeans will go to China. They're already doing that now. They're going through, purchases from Brazil and Argentina and other nations that are buying at a discount, because right now we're trading at a discount of anywhere from $1.50 to $1.95 against Brazilian soybeans. But
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office, and second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist healthcare program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Some of your Facebook comments. We're just getting ready for the, to be called a hypocrite this morning because the mainstream media has certainly gotten their marching orders and their narrative with this CNN tape. Cosmo on Facebook is skeptical, though. He said, third-hand news from a lawyer's lawyer? Please forgive my skepticism. That's pretty good, Cosmo. Let's see, what else do we have here? I saw that Tim said we voted for Trump, warts and all, or he voted for Trump, warts and all. Everybody knew it. Let's see here. This is great. Cosmo says, the same people who claim they are not manipulated by the media will be queued up on Black Friday. That's actually really good. That's very observant. What else do we have here? I saw a few others I wanted to get to. We knew who Donald Trump was long before he ran for president, saving America saving America from the progressive socialist left was more important. Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. The same people, listen to this. Amy writes, the same people worried about Donald Trump cozied up to Harvey Weinstein and praised Roman Polanski. Let that sink in. Another Tim writes, Donald Trump led a billionaire New York lifestyle. Yeah, that's the whole. This whole thing with the payment of something that happened 10 years ago. I said the word. If you're a billionaire and you live in New York, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. What I should have said was a lot of temptation, but I think that goes without saying. Anyway, moving on. We appreciate your comments. Sound off at facebook.com/Conduit News. And listen to this story. So we have a Ten Commandments monument on the Capitol grounds because it went through a process. And this has to be said before we get into this, because you have to understand there was a bill filed to create a monument on the Capitol grounds. It went through a committee. It went through a chamber. Went through another committee. Went through another chamber. It passed all four of those proceedings and was signed into law. We now have the Ten Commandments statue, and now everyone's saying it's a violation of separation of church and state. No, it's not. It would only be a violation of anybody's rights if the Satanists got a representative to do all that Jason Rapert did, and then you decide not to put the monument up. Then you'd have a case, my friends. If I could call you friends. Lucian Greaves, a spokesman for the New York-based Satanic Temple, presents a proposal to erect a statue of Baphomet, a deity that is part man, part goat, to a subcommittee at the Capitol Arts and Grounds Commission back on January 25th, 2017. This is the photo that you see. Did you show the photo of this guy? Yeah, there he is. I guess a model of what would you say? How would you say that? He just looks like a very reasonable person. And that's not a club he's holding. I'm sure those are plans, blueprints, if you will. By the way, this Baphomet statue that they want to put up on the Capitol grounds, you have to understand it's, not only is it disgusting, but it's part goat, but it's also part man. Original, if you look at the actual one, they've kind of toned it down a little bit. It's part man and part woman. Very strange, right? Very strange. Also, the animal-human hybrid. You can see that throughout history. If you know what the occult's goals are. Let me just say that. So there's a lawsuit that contends that the placement of the monument at the Capitol constitutes an illegal government endorsement of religion. That is absolute baloney, but the Satanic Temple wants to erect that 8.5-foot-tall bronze statue of Baphomet. The motion filed Thursday said Robbins has been injured by disparate treatment known by the state in which she lives, and asserts this court can order the placement of the Baphomet monument on public grounds, or the court can order the removal of the Ten Commandments monument. Let me just say, no, you cannot. The Ten Commandments monument is there because of legislation. If a court were to order you put a Baphomet statue there, that would literally be legislating from the bench. No, you cannot. And I have to say, for the public peace, you probably shouldn't.
They're buying them, and it's going into China. And the other thing is the European Union is buying U.S. soybeans, and that's always been a tough sell. The EU is difficult to deal with on a good day, and so for them to come in and buy, they're the number 2 importer of soybeans in the world by a distant margin. China imports 95 million, or expected to import 95 million tons this year. That's up 26% from 4 years ago. The EU is at 14.5 million tons, so it's a very distant second, but still a significant destination for U.S. soybeans, and the fact that they're buying U.S. soybeans now is also good.
I mean, this is really great information. We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford, and he certainly is very knowledgeable about how this, I say trade war, only because I'm, corrupted by these headlines as well. We've got the mainstream media, they use these words like trade war. I think they do it to try to, really kind of, diminish the positive aspects of this and how we do actually have to start reasserting ourselves so that America can get a better deal. That seems to be what the president is doing here. He's trying to alter what has been an imbalance that it seems to have grown over the decades. Recently, we played this at the first of the hour. We talked about the president and what he said to the Sun paper about, the Brexit deal. And, you mentioned it's hard to negotiate with the EU. The president said yesterday to British media that if they don't actually have a clean Brexit and actually allow this to happen, it's going to jeopardize the potential trade deal, direct trade deal with the UK and the United States, because if Theresa May just tries to rename whatever their association is with the European Union, and it's basically exactly the way it was, but it's under a different name, then Donald Trump is saying, well, we would still be negotiating basically with the EU, and we don't want to do that. Like you said, I think a lot of Americans, Rick, are just now educating themselves as to the trade realities that we haven't really known about in the past. Like, I never knew it was hard to negotiate with the EU until you just said it.
Yeah, they're on their best day, they're tough to deal with. But and look, there's a whole lot of political correctness and issues that are viewed through that lens that really kind of color our relationship with the EU, and it's been a problem for quite a while. But President Trump went over there and with the NATO conference, and he just basically said, he put his cards on the table. Here's how it's got to be. And we're not going to, we can't be responsible. James Mattis said this, it's almost as if we love your children more than you do, because we're doing the...
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. As always, good morning to you. And I want to start this segment by reminding you that it's brought to you by the Patriots of Act 746. They are on a mission to educate the people of Arkansas about your gun rights, open carry, concealed carry without a permit, constitutional carry, the decriminalization of carrying a weapon in this state has commenced, and it did so back in 2015. And here we are today. And last I checked, it's not the wild, wild west outside like the liberal left likes to claim. If you want to know more about the Patriots of Act 746, go to Facebook.com and search for Patriots of Act 746. Ask to be a member. It's a closed group, but it is a fast-growing group. Here to talk more about that with the Patriots of Act 746, Mr. Chuck Clifton is back on the program. Chuck, welcome to the program, sir.
Good morning, Paul. Thank you for having me back.
Yes, sir. Now, let's start right there. I mentioned that the page is growing. It is just really exploding with members. And so are you involved at all with, new people that maybe hear this segment or they hear about Patriots from a friend. Are you involved at all with the educational aspect of this? You have people, I'm sure, that become a member of the page and have a lot of questions about what they can and cannot do. How's that going so far?
Paul, it's going pretty good. We're all directly involved with the new people. And anytime you have an influx of new people, it's people coming there to actually want to know what the laws are. And we try to educate them on exactly what the statutes are. With that said, I'd also like to remind all of our members that's on the page that to jump in and help out, and a lot of them do. There's some good people there with a lot of good information. And, we was all new to this at one time before 746 was passed, and once it was passed in 2013, we all kind of had to get educated. And once I got educated on it, then I wanted to educate others.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, you said 2013. Yeah, my apologies. It was 2013. You gave the wrong date earlier. So is there anybody that joins that just doesn't quite or is just amazed that you can open carry, or according to what the law says? And I know we had Tim Loggins on yesterday. He carries concealed without a permit specifically, to educate. I mean, is there anybody that just can't believe it because they have heard or they've been conditioned by the authorities to believe the opposite for so long?
Yeah. Sometimes there's people on there, they just can't believe that they've been told this. Indoctrination is what I call it, for so long. And whenever they've been told that for so long, it just takes more patience and more time with those type of people, Paul, to be able to educate them on what the law actually is. Mm-hmm. We encourage everybody to get involved, to ask questions. If they don't understand something, ask. We're more than happy to furnish them a statute with that. We encourage them to go read the law for themselves.
Yeah.
Once you read the law for yourself, it's kind of plain, and you can, it's kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I wish, some people in positions of power would kind of get on board with that, the plain meaning of the law. All right. Well, so
the ones in power would be nice if they would just read the law before they decided to pass it. In most cases, I think they just pass it. And we have to pass it to find out what's in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. We're talking with Chuck Clifton now. Chuck, one of the reasons there still is confusion, or let me just say this: there would be no confusion if there was a test case in court for this, Act 746 as it is now, and the new law, and so a lot of people have been wondering. That's never happened, because if you do get arrested for possession of a weapon under the old way or the old presumption, you got prosecutors across the state that have just dropped the charges because they know they can't get a conviction because of what the law says, because, hey, possession of a weapon in Arkansas has been decriminalized. But there is a case now up in or over in Greenbrier. Now tell us about that. You were at that hearing. Can you start over and tell us why there was a hearing?
Okay. I don't have the exact date, Paul, but a gentleman by the name of Kirby Ward was on his way home from work, which, by the way, he was on his way home from work from another county. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. And they stopped him for an expired tag. Mr. Kirby has relatives that are police officers. They had informed Mr. Kirby, if you are stopped while carrying your weapon, to unload your weapon and put it on the dash, in which Mr. Kirby complied. And as the officer was walking up to the side of the vehicle, he heard the slide action of the pistol. I can understand the officer's concern with the way times are nowadays, and Mr. Kirby definitely needed I would like to call a old-fashioned tongue lashing for that act. But being detained and charged with carrying a weapon would have been a option there. Yep. But that's what he was charged with. He was charged with expired tags and carrying a weapon.
Okay. So that's the dispute. That's the dispute, and of course, according to what the law says, not only is possession of a weapon decriminalized, but he was also coming home from another county, which the journey provision would also apply in this instance.
You are exactly correct, and let me just just so I can remind everybody, Paul, let me read what the actual 573-120 says here. A person commits the offense of carrying a weapon if he or she possesses a weapon, knife, or club on or about his or her persons in a vehicle occupied by him or herself, otherwise readily available for the use with the purpose to attempt to unlawfully employ the handgun, knife, or club as a weapon against another person. Here is the defense for that, also in Mr. Kirby's place, because he did not have unlawful intent. This is what it says. Journey means travel beyond the county in which a person lives. Okay? Mr. Kirby was told that since he was working over there, the journey law did not apply to him, if you can believe that.
That's crazy.
Now, I've read this law over many a time, and I've read it over this morning because I have been known to miss something, and I cannot find nothing in here where it says anything about a journey law only applies if you're not working.
Yeah.
It says the person is on a journey beyond the county in which person lives, unless the person is 18 years of age or less. That's all it says about a journey. So where this police chief got that because he was coming home from work that he wasn't on a journey is, I would wish that chief could show me in this law where he found that.
Yeah, it's clear that this was an overreaction by the law enforcement, and this is another reason why we have such a problem, communication issue here. Now, the journey provision has always confused me anyway, Chuck. That's why just the normal unlawful intent, the burden of proof, I think that's the better way to go. The journey provision is confusing to me because what am I supposed to do when I come back into my county? Throw my gun out my window when I cross into my home county? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Exactly.
Which is why 5-73-120 essentially says, well, yeah, you got the journey law. We defined it. We've always had this journey provision, and they actually defined it with Act 746 of what a journey is. It was very ambiguous before, but beyond that, the rest of the act, I think the second section of the act goes on to decriminalize the possession of a weapon, whether you're on a journey or whether you're in your home county. It doesn't matter anymore. Am I right on that?
You're exactly right. Once the defenses, when they amended that law, Paul, they didn't take the defenses for carrying a weapon out of it. Under the old law, if you was on a journey, then that was a defense for carrying that weapon. Well, when they redefined what 746 or 573-120 was, they could have actually done away with all of the exceptions and not hurt the law at all, because in the very law itself, it does away with the defense.
Mm-hmm. So
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So we have a situation, though, where there was a hearing yesterday for this gentleman, Kirby. What's his name? Kirby what?
His name's Kirby Ward.
Kirby Ward. Now, you were at that hearing yesterday. What happened?
Okay, it was just a hearing. Mr. Ward went in and he pled not guilty. They reset his court date for a trial for August the 21st at 9:30, at which there'll be some of us that went attended. We'll be back over there for Mr. Ward. And I guess my assumption is I think they're probably going to drop those charges at said trial. I don't see how they can continue to charge him with carrying a weapon whenever the prosecutor, from the discovery and the things that I've found, that there's no way that he can prove beyond that Mr. Kirby had anything other than lawful intent with that weapon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had the honestly, he had the officer's best interest at heart. It just didn't come across that way. Understandably so. It didn't come across that way at all. And
no.
So how does a prosecutor
prove psychological intent. You can't mind meld with this person. You don't really know. So how do you prove that? And that's the whole point behind the decriminalization of carrying a weapon. And it's actually a huge transfer of freedom from the government back to the people. It's really exciting.
Yes, it is. And that right there, that just what you just said, you can't mind meld with them to find out what their intent was, is why prosecutors will not prosecute this. I've talked to several law enforcement officers, and they said, do you realize how hard it is to prove somebody's intent? I mean, you've almost got to just walk up to them and tell them, hey, I've got this gun. I'm going to go over here and shoot somebody.
Yeah.
Before they would even have cause to think you had bad intent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, or, I mean, there's another scenario where, maybe after the fact, there's a social media post. Hey, I'm on my way to do harm to you, or a text message. I'm coming after you. Then you might have something. You might be able to prove intent there, but
yes.
But those are circumstances are going to be rare.
Yes, and very rare. And in this case right here, the intent is just not there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the prosecutor's thinking over there.
Well,
the prosecutor in the case is name is Dustin Chapman.
Okay,
he's the city attorney over there, and they had a substitute judge yesterday. The substitute judge's name was Brad Williams, and he was a lawyer filling in for the absentee judge. So
interesting.
The substitute judge said that he would just hold this over for the regular judge. And like I said, I don't see how this prosecutor is going to be able to prove this.
Yeah.
But whenever the regular judge comes back, they may just throw this out.
Well, so
who knows? We're going to find out on the 21st.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So is he incurring legal fees? I mean, how's Kirby Ward paying for this? I mean, I feel bad that he made a mistake. There was a miscommunication, and then now the officer overreacted, and now he's got to go through court proceedings, and a waste of time for him, essentially, to do all this, and money. I'm sure it costs money to do all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. He was appointed a public defender yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see what this public defender does, if this public defender actually looks at the law or if he just tries to make a deal.
Yeah, well, let's hope.
I would not encourage Mr. Kirby to take any type of deal. I would go ahead and take my chances in court. And even if he is found guilty at the district level, I feel that as soon as this appeal goes to the circuit court, it's going to be thrown out. It's going to be trashed.
Yeah.
Because it's just not there. The intent is not there. Not to mention, he was also on a journey, which is a defense for actually carrying a weapon, and he fit that to a T. He was outside the county, came back into his county of residence.
Here's the real question.
He's got double protection.
Here's the real question, though. It would really help if there was a test case. I mean, is there any I know it would also be. It's kind of hard to say this because it would also kind of waste the taxpayers' time. But if there was a pro-Second Amendment prosecutor out there who realizes what the law really says and is tired of all this, this all just confusion and politicians fence straddling on what the definition of constitutional carry is and all this other stuff, it would be very helpful if there would be a prosecutor that would try to get a conviction, and you appeal it until somebody, you know what I'm saying? It would be helpful, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Paul, there's a lot of us that tried. So if anybody out there listening knows a prosecutor that'd be willing to do this, please contact one of the admins on the page, and we will set that up so that we can have a friendly prosecution and see if we can't get this thing put to bed and we can move on to something else.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's kind of, it's a weird situation because if a prosecutor's doing their job, they're not going to pursue charges when you can't get a conviction. And so, it's
that's right.
It's certainly a gray area there, but if you have our elected officials, okay, who have, are saying, like the governor says, we have constitutional carry, but you still have to have a permit to carry concealed. Well, he doesn't. He is redefining what constitutional carry is. So, according to the governor's definition, we're actually not constitutional carry, but according to what the law says and what prosecutors are doing, okay, we are. But then you have law enforcement and you have the Arkansas State Police. They want to keep their revenue. They want to keep people convinced they have to pay a permission slip fee and a background check and, get their rights sold back to them. It's a very messy situation. And what we need in this state, and we need this in so many areas, is leadership. And we're not getting that. And so we'll kind of see where the chips fall. Chuck, I'll give you the last word, sir.
All right, Paul. Yeah, that's exactly what we need and that's why you see this at a local level. It's not at a circuit court or nothing. It's in a district. Mm-hmm. And until we show these people that, look, this is what the law is, and the deputy prosecutors that would be at the next level let these district prosecutors know, don't do this. We're not wasting our time with it. You're just wasting your city's money. Mm-hmm. Until then, I think we may still end up seeing one or two of these cases every once in a while. But as far as I know, they've all been dropped, and I expect the same with this one. If not, it'll really be surprising, Paul.
Yep. All right, Chuck Clifton with the Patriots VAC 746. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on the program.
Well, thanks for having me, Paul.
All right, you have a great day. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Patriots VAC 746. Go to Facebook, look them up, ask to be a member, join the online sensation today. Folks, coming up at 7:05 when we start the second hour, I'm going to tell you about how Governor Asa Hutchinson appears to be courting Farm Bureau. Now, the Farm Bureau, the Arkansas Farm Bureau, they have opposed his efforts to consolidate power and undo, really, the Arkansas State Plant Board many times. Now, undo, people are going to be upset that I use that word, but come on, we know what's going on here. The governor doesn't like how independent the Arkansas State Plant Board is. The governor would have rather Monsanto's dicamba not be banned because it's Monsanto. And so we'll talk about how the governor appears to be courting Farm Bureau. We'll talk about the surprise early retirement of the Arkansas State Plant Board Director Terry Walker. Conduit News had that story in a tweet yesterday because after we got done with our agricultural segment from yesterday, I had farmers reaching out to me left and right saying all kinds of stuff. We've got to go to break, but we have that story for you when we come back. Also, at the bottom of the next hour, we'll be talking with Cato Institute scholar Mr. Trevor Burrus on the federal government's new guidelines concerning nonprofits having to disclose their donors. We'll be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
They're buying them, and it's going into China. And the other thing is the European Union is buying U.S. soybeans, and that's always been a tough sell. The EU is difficult to deal with on a good day. And so for them to come in and buy, they're the number 2 importer of soybeans in the world by a distant margin. China imports 95 million, or expected to import 95 million tons this year. That's up 26% from 4 years ago. The EU is at 14.5 million tons, so it's a very distant second, but still a significant destination for U.S. soybeans, and the fact that they're buying U.S. soybeans now is also good.
I mean, this is really great information. We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford, and he certainly is very knowledgeable about how this, I say trade war, only because I'm, corrupted by these headlines as well. We've got the mainstream media that
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
As we wrap up the first hour of the program, let's get to some of your comments. Amy on Facebook writing, talked to the mother of one of my son's friends last night, whose significant other was arrested by a police officer in Cache because he was open carrying while he was traveling home on his motorcycle. He called the Arkansas State Police, who had to educate the local cop that this gentleman was well within his rights to open carry. He was on a journey because he was traveling from Craighead County to Independence County. So the Arkansas State Police here, if this story is true, which I don't doubt, Amy, is essentially educating people that, the journey provision is real, but they want to really completely ignore the second part of the law. The journey provisions in the first, the second. The second one says it doesn't. The journey really doesn't even matter. Again, it's illogical. The journey, using the journey law as a defense, to me is illogical, because am I literally, okay, this guy's traveling from Craighead County to Independence County. When he gets to Independence County border, does he got to throw his gun away? Because now he's inside his county. And so that's the whole point, is if you read the next section of the law, it says, hey, the journey provision, in a way, is just an extra defense, more so. It's like icing on the cake. You already have your rights in the second section there, where it says you have to prove that you are attempting to unlawfully employ the weapon against another person. Unlawfully, mind you. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Mr. Dan Borum on Facebook writing, it would save time in the future. I believe he's referencing the idea of a test case where a prosecutor who knows what the law says, knows they can't get a conviction, but is tired of all these police officers. There has not been one conviction of carrying a weapon, according to Tim here on Facebook, since 2013, under the Section 2 of Act 746. Since 2013. Now think about that for a second. Think about that. That's wild. That's wild. So definitely want to keep that in mind. But would it save time in the future for a prosecutor who knows they're not going to get a conviction, but take it to trial anyway? You could make the argument it would save tax dollars in the long run, because this is just, you're also, the public defender gets money. Now, every time you get to drum somebody up, take them through a hearing, get assigned a public defender, you're now going to, the state's paying the public defender, local tax dollars are paying the public defender. Also, the charges get dropped and dismissed. When it comes time to push the button to charge somebody with possession of a weapon. It's fascinating stuff here at the local level. Folks, when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about Arkansas Farm Bureau and just kind of reiterate. It was a crazy, crazy coincidence. Yesterday we talked about Governor Asa Hutchinson's consolidation, his plan to consolidate the ag department. And then, of course, have farmers contact us and tell us about the sudden retirement of the Arkansas State Plant Board Director after a meeting at the Capitol. I'll have that story next.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Use these words like trade war. I think they do it to try to, really kind of, diminish the positive aspects of this and how we do actually have to start reasserting ourselves so that America can get a better deal. That seems to be what the president is doing here. He's trying to alter what has been an imbalance that it seems to have grown over the decades. Recently, we played this at the first of the hour. We talked about the president and what he said to the Sun paper about, the Brexit deal. And, you mentioned it's hard to negotiate with the EU. The president said yesterday to British media that if they don't actually have a clean Brexit and actually allow this to happen, it's going to jeopardize the potential trade deal, direct trade deal with the UK and the United States. Because if Theresa May just tries to rename whatever their association is with the European Union, and it's basically exactly the way it was, but it's under a different name, then Donald Trump is saying, well, we would still be negotiating basically with the EU, and we don't want to do that. Like you said, I think a lot of Americans, Rick, are just now educating themselves as to the trade realities that we haven't really known about in the past. Like, I never knew it was hard to negotiate with the EU until you just said it.
Yeah, they're on their best day, they're tough to deal with. But and look, there's a whole lot of political correctness and issues that are viewed through that lens that really kind of color our relationship with the EU, and it's been a problem for quite a while. But President Trump went over there and with the NATO conference, and he just basically said, he put his cards on the table. Here's how it's got to be, and we're not going to, we can't be responsible. James Mattis said this, it's almost as if we love your children more than you do, because we're doing the lion's share to protect you from Russia. Meanwhile, you're doing business with Russia. Mm-hmm. So, how does this make sense? And so Great Britain voted to leave the EU. Now, I'm an Anglophile. I lived in Great Britain as a kid. I love the British people. I was over there recently, and I can tell you that you've either got to do it or don't. This sort of half step that Theresa May is engaging in is sort of an effort to try and persuade people that, yes, she's responding to the vote of the British people, but at the same time retain that sort of what she views as that level of comfort with the European Union, but she's not really making a Brexit. She's making a more of a political accession, if nothing else. And quite frankly, I don't think the British people are going to stand for that. just from the tone that I've perceived while I was over there last month, I think that you've either got to go all in or all out. But this half-stepping is not palatable, and I think she's in trouble. She was a Remainer and now is responsible for implementing Brexit. She's trying to half-step it. And ultimately, you've got to get with the program or get out. And I think the British people are probably going to say it's time for you to go. But that said, back to the trade deal, Donald Trump's absolutely right. We want to have a trade deal with Great Britain, of all people. They're our greatest and longest ally. We certainly want to have a relationship with them. But we're not going to do it as an agent of the EU. That doesn't help us. And the EU is a separate deal, and we've tried that. We've been continue to try that. We continue to try to engage and trade with the EU, and they're extremely difficult to deal with. And so it would be much better for everybody involved if the UK just did their own thing, reestablished themselves as a sovereign, reclaimed their border security, reclaimed their cultural heritage, and were proud of it, and they want to be. And this is what I love about the British people, and that's really what I love about the American people. And I think that's what you're seeing. And it's not just, by the way, it's not just in Great Britain that this is taking place. The whole globalist notion, which, EU is sort of a microcosm of that, that's really not taking root. I was met with some Australians recently, and it's an awful lot like the United States, the dynamic there with really kind of proclaiming their own independence and sovereignty and being proud of their heritage as Australians, as we are as being Americans, and as Filipinos are of being Filipino. And why should these nations be deprived of their history, their heritage, and their culture? And the answer is they shouldn't be. It doesn't mean that we can't do business together. It doesn't mean that we can't have economic ties to these nations. It just means that we're different, and we have different history, we have different culture, and quite frankly, that's what I like about these other countries. That's why I like visiting other countries.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
So Conduit News, welcome to the program, by the way, hour number 2. Yesterday, Conduit News tweeted, I guess around lunch, tweet came across that the Arkansas State Plant Board Director, Terry Walker, was going to retire, announced his retirement. Now, the optics here are quite interesting, and they leave a lot of room for speculation and a lot of room to the imagination. We did a story on the governor's plan to reform the Department of Agriculture. The podcast of yesterday's program, one of them is titled, ASA versus the Plant Board Round 3 Fight. Said in the video game voice of Street Fighter 2 on the SNES. That would be the better one. Yeah, so round 3 fight, because he's tried 2 other times to get something like this done. But guess what? The Farm Bureau, Arkansas Farm Bureau, has opposed the governor's efforts every time to try to mess with Arkansas's largest industry, agriculture. So if you fail once, you try again. You fail a second time, you might want to start building coalitions. And so what it appears to me, what is happening, is that the governor is trying to build a coalition and trying to woo the Arkansas Farm Bureau into submission to say, sit down, shut up, I'm going to reform agriculture. Now, I don't know why. I don't know what's not working. I wish somebody would tell me. The only thing that I can tell is that ASA wanted dicamba to be used because Monsanto wanted dicamba to be used. That's the only thing I can figure out. And the plant board stood up to the governor and said, no. And this probably makes the governor upset. The governor's like, wait a second, I'm elected. Here's some independent body. And so the ag department is going to reform and is going to be able to lord the funding over you. If they can take the plant board's funding, then basically give them the money. They can also take the money away, and that seems to be. But if you listen to the governor's proposal, he says nothing's going to change. He's got 5 bullet point proposal, and 3 of those bullet points start out by saying nothing will change, nothing will change, nothing will change. It is very, well, first of all, if nothing's going to change, don't tell me nothing's going to change. You're offering, the whole premise of this is that you're trying to change things, but then you tell me nothing's going to change. It's like it's like a subtle manipulation. It's like passive aggressive. It's like the governor wants to reform agriculture, but he wants to do it the way you would if you were in a passive aggressive argument with, well, I can't say it. So you know what I mean. Come on, guys, you know what I'm getting at, right? Yeah. So it's a passive aggressive attempt to allow the Farm Bureau to submit, and that's what's going on here. It's fascinating because you see, the Farm Bureau had their annual convention in Rogers, and the governor leaves Little Rock. Now, here's what I'm told. Sources tell Conduit News that the governor left Little Rock to go to pitch his new proposal to the Farm Bureau in Rogers as Terry Walker, the executive director of the Arkansas State Plant Board, was getting a phone call and getting summoned to the Capitol. This is what's funny. I was like, man, this is just familiar to me. Now, I know it's low stakes, well, it's I don't know about low stakes, but it is I don't know. I don't want to be a sensationalist here, but it really reminded me of The Godfather. Anybody see The Godfather movies? You know how at the end they always tie up loose ends? At the end, like Michael Corleone is he's in the church and all this other stuff is going on behind the scenes that nobody knows about, but Michael knows. And so it's like Asa leaving the Capitol to go up to Farm Bureau to make his pitch, but in secret there's a meeting with Terry Walker and he's being told in no uncertain terms, hey, it's time for you to retire. I mean, I know the Marble Palace establishment's going to hate that comparison, but it's just a funny one. Come on, I'm just having fun here. It does remind me of kind of like The Godfather. Now, the interesting thing here is what is the plant board going to do? Is the plant board just going to roll over and take it? In the past, and we're going to get into this, I have a ton of I've got to do some more research, but there's a lot of people that are now starting to get uneasy about this, and they're starting to say, well, why was this particular plant board member, last year let go? What did he say? Did he raise an objection he wasn't supposed to raise? And so I'm getting a ton of information about, a lot of people are asking questions to me about lobbyists. They're asking questions to me about Monsanto. Arkansas is the only state. I mean, we're one of the most fertile states. We have some of the best ground to grow anything in the country. And the fact that Monsanto had this dicamba and our independent regulatory board, the plant board, said we're going to ban it from this date to this date based on climate. And look, there's some farmers that disagree. There's some farmers that wanted to use it. I was told I got a message the other day on Facebook that even with the ban in Arkansas and, the careful application of it, there was still some crop damage here in the state. But if you look at the crop damage across the country, those states that were using Monsanto, there's a lot of crops that were damaged this year. Arkansas didn't have as many. You know why? Because we said, no, thank you. And you also have to understand that there's something else at play here. If there's a lot, if there's such a thing as a dicamba resistant seed, a dicamba resistant product, we're pretty sure that it's going to be Monsanto that's offering the cure to what their product is doing to everybody else. So it's a way to corner the market. I think it's clear that the governor wants to reorganize the agricultural department because he wanted Monsanto to be able to do what Monsanto wanted to do. And I think the Arkansas State Plant Board got in the way of those plans. And so now what is he doing? Well, he's trying to build a coalition. He's got to convince. This is the truth. If Asa Hutchinson wants to do away with the plant board as it is today. And I know they're going to say, we're not doing away with the plant board. I'm just saying, if you want to change the plant board from what it is now to something different to where you can take away their funding if you don't like what they're doing, you're going to have to get the Farm Bureau on board, Governor. I think he knows this. And that is why when Terry Walker is now out effective immediately, or at least his authorities gone effective immediately, they're looking at hiring a guy by the name of Butch Calhoun. It's right here in the story. See, Terry Walker, he's out. He announced his retirement. He said, sometimes you just decide it's time to go. Well, yeah, after you have a meeting at the Capitol, sometimes you just decide it's time to go. Walker first joined the plant board in 2002. Asa Hutchinson said, quote, "I appreciate Terry's long-time service to the state and agricultural community and wish him the best in retirement." Now, the guy is 70. The final decision on a new director is to be made by the plant board, Hutchinson said. "My recommendation to the plant board has not been made at this time." However, the next paragraph says that Butch Calhoun of Des Arc, who was Arkansas Secretary of Agriculture from 2012 to 2016, said Tuesday morning that Hutchinson approached him 10 to 14 days ago about being the plant board director. Quote, "The governor asked if I'd be interested," Calhoun said. "I said I definitely would be." So the governor hasn't picked anybody, yet we have one guy coming out and said, "Oh, yeah, the governor talked to me about that 2 weeks ago." Yeah, he said this before he I'm paraphrasing, before he forced Terry Walker to retire. He wants me to fill that position. Now, keep in mind that Butch Calhoun, I'm sure he's a nice guy. I'm sure he wants to be the director of the plant board. But I'm told that he's got very good connections and rapport with the Farm Bureau. Yeah, that's right. We're building coalitions. Bend that arc of justice. And let's see here. He's also a BB appointee. Butch Calhoun, again, sure, he's a nice guy. Here's an old article from Roby Brock, June 27th, 2012. Former state rep and Prairie County Judge Butch Calhoun will lead the Arkansas Agricultural Department, whose current leader, Richard Bell, is retiring after 7 years on the job. Calhoun, who has been serving as the director of the Arkansas Department of Rural Services, was selected by the Arkansas Agricultural Board at a meeting on Wednesday. Governor Mike Beebe, who is on an agricultural trade mission to France, will have to confirm the appointment, which his spokesman said he will do. Anyway, he's a Beebe appointee. So, that's interesting. What do you guys think about this? I just want to know what else. I got to know if we're going to. I know he's got a transformation goal. All right, the governor, because Jan Morgan ran for office, the governor came out and said he wanted to shrink government. He wanted to transform government and consolidate the number of departments that answer to the governor. I get that. And the very fact that we're even talking about those concepts is because Jan Morgan ran for governor. But somebody's got to tell me what is wrong with the plant board as it is now. I don't love regulatory agencies. I think sometimes they're basically shakedown outfits. I think sometimes their regulations are not in the interest of public safety. In this case, though, you can make a strong case that the plant board did exactly what it should do, which is look out for other people's property and investments, making sure that, well, what did Thomas Jefferson said? Well, my freedom ends where yours begins, and vice versa. Thomas Jefferson put it like this: if it neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg, then don't get involved. Well, if the government gets involved when you have an activity that is stealing from people, making them poorer, or causing them personal harm, that's exactly when the government should get involved, when there is cause. Okay? I think there was an example. I think it would be stupid or naive to say that dicamba wasn't a problem, wasn't an issue. It clearly is. Not was, because it still is an issue across the rest of the agriculture community in the nation. Still is an issue. Okay? And if you don't believe it's an issue, why did dicamba sue when they couldn't use the product? I mean, it is an issue. But aside from that, and aside from the plant board going against corporate agriculture, which is what happened, the Arkansas State Plant Board went against a big corporation, right? Aside from that, what else is wrong? Is there something else wrong with it? My point is, it's the biggest industry in the state, or one of the biggest. It's what we know how to do here. And I say we, I'm not talking about me. I don't know how to farm. But it's what we collectively as Arkansans do. It's what we know how to do. We have a system in place, and it has to do with feeding ourselves. I mean, it's pretty basic. It has to do with growing things that we eat. So if you're going to mess with that system, I think you need to articulate what the problems with that system are. Not just, and the governor hasn't said anything about Monsanto. Of course, if he does, then that will just expose what the real motivations behind this really are. I'm all for having an efficient, small, transparent government. I am all for that. I hope that when the governor actually, I hope when he does what he attempts to do what he said, I hope he actually does it. I hope he actually does shrink government. I hope there's less employees. I hope I hope we spend less money on government and everything else. I have a text message here. If the governor really wants to shrink government, why not just abolish the Department of Agriculture altogether, but leave the plant board alone? Right? The Department of Agriculture was something that was a new thing. Right? It's a $1.3 million budget, but that was something that came along after the plant board. The plant board, I think, has celebrated its 100-year anniversary this year. That wasn't they weren't allowed to, apparently. Yeah. Let me know what you think about this. If you're gonna mess with ag, you better know what you're doing. I just need to know aside from Monsanto not getting what they want, I need to know what other problems. And I think I would encourage the legislators to ask that as well. What other problems are we having here with the plant board? Any regulatory agency is going to make mistakes and going to be annoying to this farmer or that farmer and everything else. And again, I'm sure there are regulations that are ridiculous in every regulatory agency. But how can you not think that this Monsanto thing and stopping dicamba, to me, I just feel like that was a good thing. And the fact that Arkansas is the only one that was able to stop it or ban it for a period of time. Tell me where I'm wrong. Again, I'm not a farmer. I do know farmers, and farmers talk to me. Let me know what you think. 870-275-9799. Got to get that Farm Bureau on board, though, if you're going to do this. We got to take a break. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we'll be talking with Mr. Trevor Burrus. He is a Cato Institute scholar. We're going to be talking about the new rules concerning nonprofits not having to disclose their donors and the new instruction from the federal government on that. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
If we just shake up the world into one homogenized, globalized system, what's the fun in that? Heck, I mean, why do I want to, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I enjoy going to Great Britain because it's Great Britain, right? I enjoy going and visiting other countries because they're different from ours. But I love America, and I still believe that we're the best country in the world, and there is such a thing as American exceptionalism that doesn't necessarily make us better, but certainly makes us markedly different from the rest of the world. And I think that's what the rest of the world really wants to see. And these folks in some of these foreign countries that I named, they are craving U.S. leadership that's been absent for about 10 years, and Donald Trump is really about bringing back U.S. leadership. And so that's what's taking place around the world.
Yeah, it certainly is. I concur with your sentiments there.
Money, power, prestige, essence, available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From the Nata Rhino collection, the fragrance of backroom deals, nepotism, the aroma of higher taxes, subliminal deception, deep state, ace, made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Some of your comments on Facebook. We have Fronda. Fronda on Facebook writes, the good thing about the plant board is it's not controlled by the governor yet. Gary on Facebook writing, Monsanto created a problem to capitalize on the solution worth billions of dollars. Richard on Facebook writes, it's a major issue in Arkansas today. 400,000 acres of damaged vegetation so far. Interesting. I mean, we have just a lot of people talking about, let's see, somebody wrote something about Monsanto lobbyists. Where did that one go? Somebody asking, is Farm Bureau going to get on board? Probably they will. It all depends. It all depends. I was surprised if, I mean, you know, they lasted this long opposing. So, you know, but again, you got to, it's time to, let's make a deal. Right? That's the phrase that we're going to, we're going to hear, or somebody's going to hear. Folks, the new rules are out. And really, real quick, if we can look at our Conduit for Commerce policy segment, we have some really interesting news about the direction of the nonprofit rules, talking about disclosing your donors. Now, the New York Times, of course, freaked out about this when they wrote that the United States is easing dark money rules. President Donald Trump's administration will end a long-standing requirement that certain nonprofit organizations disclose the names of their large donors to the IRS, a move that will allow some political groups to shield their sources of funding from government scrutiny. The change, which has been long sought by conservatives and Republicans in Congress, will affect labor unions, social clubs, and most notably, many political groups like the National Rifle Association. Dun, dun, dun. I'm telling you, you know how the left is always like, I think this is a racist dog whistle. Well, I think that the left and the media, they've got their dog whistles as well. It's like, NRA, oh, you must want to murder somebody. But honestly, folks, do you believe in the First Amendment or don't you? I don't know about you, but I want to be able to give my money to who I want to give it, and I don't want to have to tell the government about it, especially the IRS. I don't want to open myself up for Lois Lerner-type persecution when eventually they ask, you said that you pray at the beginning of your meetings. What do you pray? Is the content of your prayers? The government actually asked that under the Obama administration of these people filing nonprofit status. It's none of your business. Don't be a totalitarian freak, okay? I want to give my money who I want to give it to. And yeah, are there rich people that got more money than me that want to give it away? Yeah, but you know what? It's called freedom of association. And these people that want to know who you give your money to, they only want to know it so they could bully you, so they could end you, so that you can be vulnerable now for reprisals. And listen, so when a politician's like, hey, let's make a deal, what they're really talking about is extortion. That's what they're talking about. Extortion. And I think the First Amendment should guarantee the freedom of association and the freedom to be anonymous and to be and to not have to disclose to the government authorities who you're friends with or who you give money to. That's my opinion. We'll talk more about this with the Cato Institute's Trevor Burrus when we come back. And for more on Conduit for Commerce, by the way, go to conduitforcommerce.org.
If we just shake up the world into one homogenized, globalized system, what's the fun in that? Heck, I mean, why do I want to, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I enjoy going to Great Britain because it's Great Britain, right? I enjoy going and visiting other countries because they're different from ours. But I love America, and I still believe that we're the best country in the world, and there is such a thing as American exceptionalism that doesn't necessarily make us better, but certainly makes us markedly different from the rest of the world. And I think that's what the rest of the world really wants to see. And these folks in from these foreign countries that I named, they are craving U.S. leadership that's been absent for about 10 years, and Donald Trump is really about bringing back U.S. leadership. And so that's what's taking place around the world.
Yeah, it certainly is. I concur with your sentiments there. We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. Last question. So I know, the House has nothing really to do with the confirmation process of Supreme Court nominees, but what are your thoughts on Brett Kavanaugh? What's the feeling up there among your colleagues?
Well, the book on him is, he's an originalist, much like Clarence Thomas. And I think that what you could expect from him is, I don't care about, conservative as much as I care about constitutionalists. And so I think that's what you have in a pick like Kavanaugh. I read an interesting analysis earlier today or this morning. And what the liberals up here are mostly afraid of is not Kavanaugh, but they're actually afraid of the Constitution. And so they talk about the Constitution, but what they really want to do is put people in place to help them alter the Constitution. And so there's a difference between, an originalist interpretation of the Constitution versus judicial activism. And so when they're denied their opportunity to engage in judicial activism, that scares them. And so what they're afraid of more than Neil Gorsuch or Brett Kavanaugh or Alito or Clarence Thomas, what they fear more is the fact that they are denied the opportunity to engage in really a perversion of the Constitution. So what they fear really is the Constitution itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they know that if you have somebody that just actually adheres to the binding of the Constitution, meaning let's subscribe to the enumerated powers, the government can do this, what's specifically enumerated, and it can't do what's not specifically enumerated. And that, you're exactly right, Congressman Crawford. That's a great analysis. That does seem to be what they are worried about. Well, I listen, I really appreciate you coming on.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us. Folks, welcome to the program. We have Mr. Trevor Burrus on the line. Trevor is a Cato Institute scholar. He is a research fellow in the Cato Institute's Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies and the Center for the Study of Science, as well as managing editor for the Cato Supreme Court Review. His research interests include constitutional law, civil and criminal law, legal and political philosophy, legal history, and the interface between science and public policy. Please welcome Mr. Trevor Burrus. Trevor, it's great to meet you and have you on the program, sir.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to have you on. I wanted to talk a little bit about this new guidance that the federal government is giving about nonprofits. The New York Times, they call it dark money, that the U.S. is easing this dark money rule. What do you know about it?
Well, it's the greatest political salesmanship that I've ever seen. Just the term dark money, the people on the left really won some rhetorical points by naming this thing that no one really knows what it is, dark money. Generally, when we're talking about dark money, we're talking about a thing called a 501c4. So at Cato, where I work, we're a 501c3. We're an educational institution. We're not allowed to talk about advocate for political candidates or for bills to be voted on or passed. But 501c4s are a variety of nonprofit organizations that can do a lot of some political advocacy and some education. They just can't be their primary purpose, cannot be political advocacy. And different groups can give to those, different corporations can give to them, people can give to them. Some people can give to them for the purpose of political advocacy. So in 2014, the Obama administration said that those organizations' IRS forms, they have to report those donors to the IRS, which the IRS was not going to make public or anything. It was just this sort of onerous, unnecessary burden on these organizations. And what happened last week was that they simply said, you don't have to do that anymore. And they're talking about 2.9% of political spending. Everyone tries to convince you that dark money, quote unquote, is a huge part of political spending. It's almost nothing. And it's just the left's continued war on political speech that it doesn't like.
I think you're exactly right. It's political speech they don't like. There's also some First Amendment applications here, right? I mean, shouldn't I have the ability to associate with who I want to associate with, and I should be able to give them money without having to report that to the government? I think that when you have to report it to the government, it makes you vulnerable for reprisals. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And on many levels, that's exactly what the left wants. They want to be able to get this information out there. And again, I want to point out the real irony of this. The organizations were required to give this information to the IRS, but the IRS was not allowed to publish it. So it's literally not taking any information away from the public unless it gets leaked by the IRS or someone gets it out of there, which has happened before. This happened with the National Organization for Marriage. They had their donors linked to it and threatened. And the real irony here from why the left is not on board with anonymous speech and anonymous association is that the main case that the right to anonymous association came out of is a case called NAACP versus Alabama from the 50s, where the state of Alabama claimed that it needed to know the names and addresses of every person who supported or was a member of the NAACP. And, of course, in 1958, the reason the state of Alabama wanted that was so they could, put burn crosses on their lawn or attack them in other ways. And the Supreme Court says you have a right to anonymous association, and now the left doesn't believe that anymore.
Wow. They don't believe it anymore, and I'm just wondering, well, first of all, let's make clear. What you said in your opening statement was that this was something that was new. And so the idea that Donald Trump is he's basically just putting things back the way it was. That we need to make that clear.
Pre-Obama,
yeah, it's pre-Obama. We need to make that clear because the left wants everybody to think that the president is some sort of tyrant. When in reality, he's restoring things like putting the census question on, or the citizenship question on the census, and he's restoring things like, hey, maybe you shouldn't have to give your donors to the IRS, especially in light of what happened with that whole Lois Lerner scam.
No, yeah, absolutely. There's just absolutely no reason, and we've seen it. The other states who are trying to shut down political spending, left-wing states, and of course they're not trying to generally shut down left-wing political spending. They're really going after right-wing groups. But other states have tried to use this. When Kamala Harris was the Attorney General, who's now Senator, but when she was the Attorney General of California, she wanted to get that information from the IRS, and so every organization that was raising money in her state had to give that information to her. And we have seen with Americans for Prosperity in California, they had some of that information leaked, and they had their donors actually threatened. And they were able to win a case in court because they were able to show that they're actual threats, which is kind of the standard now, which I don't really like. I don't think you should have to show actual threats or try and keep yourself anonymous. But it going with that NAACP versus Alabama case, the court had said, well, you show actual threats, so you have a right to anonymous speech. But really, here's a bigger question. What is the most famous anonymous speech in the history of America? It's the Federalist Papers. They were published anonymously because it's a rich tradition. Almost all the framers wrote anonymously and associated anonymously. No one wanted to know who was signing the Declaration of Independence. They were giving away their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. So it's an American tradition. And really just, the left doesn't like political speech in a variety of contexts unless it can control it and adequately shame people. We see that, for example, with the Mozilla guy. If he gives money to an anti-gay marriage campaign, he's going to get shamed and fired. And I always just ask on the left, just put this around, put the shoe on the other foot. If your views were ones that were unacceptable in your area, if you're pro-choice in the South, do you want people being able to publish that you're pro-choice in the South and having all your neighbors hate you and all this stuff? They just never ever think about the shoe on the other foot question that is essential to First Amendment doctrine.
I'm seeing kind of in my mind as you're talking, we're talking with Trevor Burrus, a Cato Institute scholar, kind of a linear line of progression here. And it's kind of just dawning on me for the first time. And we have had some politicians here in Arkansas call for the disclosure of donors when when these groups across the state maybe come out with scorecards that they don't like, and that sort of thing. And it really, I've never thought that dark money and this whole dark money, you heard it from when the Citizens United case and everything else, and this phrase that they use. Fast forward, if you take the concept of dark money as they interpret it and you equate it with trying to silence opposition and not have a legitimate debate, you can really fill in the gap of what's happened. And now we get to Berkeley. Now we get to, okay, we have a conservative speaker or Ben Shapiro or whoever coming to speak on our college campus, and we'll just burn the college campus down because we don't even want to hear it. We don't want to debate. And so when you advocate against the First Amendment, freedom of association, I really like what you're saying here, Trevor. You're essentially equating it to you are trying to silence opposition and not have a debate, which is what we have always embraced here in America, is let's have a debate about the issues.
Yeah, and the number one rule when it comes to First Amendment is that when a politician is trying to shut down political speech, should be very concerned about the politician's interests in this. And it's one of the ironies, we had Harry Reid when he was still in the Senate, going out of the floor of the Senate many, many times and complaining about the Koch brothers, which it's just, I was like, where did all the cynicism go? This guy whose job is to run for office, and if he's a public figure, people can criticize him. He gets on the floor of the U.S. Senate, which is sort of a platform he has, a broadcast on Senate, and complains about people criticizing him. And I feel like as Americans, we should be like, any politician, no matter what the party, if they come out and they say, I'm really going to complain about this group that's criticizing me because it should be illegal to make fun of me, or which at some points we have had laws like that, like the Sedition Act. Mm-hmm. The politicians, their biggest interest is in controlling their own message and shutting down people who are going to criticize them or calling them out in some way by labeling them dark money. The only way to have a really robust First Amendment and political debate in this country is to have participation be free and open, and if you want it to be, anonymous, and have those rules apply to everyone at all times. Left-wing people can anonymously give to the Communist Party. Guess who was really into outing anonymous speech in the 50s? Republicans. They wanted to get all the people who were communists, and they wanted to make sure that their political giving was known. And so the shoe can always be on the other foot. And the only way to have this robust political debate again is to mistrust any politician who decides they're going to shut down or expose speech in the name of, quote, public good.
Mm-hmm. On the website here over at cato.org/research/campaign finance, it says this: by undermining competitive elections, campaign finance laws undermine democracy. Campaign finance reform distracts us from the real issue, the ultimate source of potential corruption, ubiquitous government. Government today fosters corruption because it exercises vast powers over virtually every aspect of life. It is any wonder that special interest, indeed, every interest but the general, should be trying either to take advantage of that or protect themselves from it. Can you expand on that a little bit, Trevor?
Yeah, so the problem with campaign finance, most campaign finance laws we have in this country didn't really exist until the mid-'70s. We had some other ones, some regulations on corporate giving, but not until the mid-'70s. And this was a very post-Watergate thing where they were worried about the cleanliness of government, and so they were worried about who was spending. And then we had a case. The ACLU was one of the plaintiffs saying that these restrictions on money are restrictions on speech. And that was the first thing where, going back to the skepticism about politicians, where you have this huge government which has a ton of favors and contracts and everything to give out. So one of the best ways of getting money out of politics is trying to get politics out of business and politics out of money. But if it's going to be involved in those things, you're going to see money flowing around, which is not necessarily a good thing. The hardest thing to convey to people when you're talking about campaign finance is many people just seem to think that giving money to a candidate or giving money to a political cause you believe in or spending it for your own speech is some sort of per se wrong. And that's not true at all. It takes money to publish, say, common sense, Thomas Paine's Common Sense, to try and change people's minds, to try and change the conversation. And you don't want that money to be controlled by politicians and have them decide who's allowed to speak because they have their own vested interest. And that's what we saw in the first campaign finance laws, is that if you have self-interested politicians who are complaining about people criticizing them, they can't just pass a law that says you're not allowed to criticize me. I mean, they're smart enough to know that that would obviously violate the First Amendment. But they can pass a law that says you can't spend money or give money to an organization that comments on or supports a candidate within 30 days of an election. And that will support them. That will help them out. It will help out incumbents the most. Incumbents are, if you restrict campaign spending, incumbents are the most helped out. And here's exactly why. If you wanted to run for office tomorrow, or one of your listeners wanted to run for office tomorrow, and I'm not sure which the congressman is down there, but the congressman has name recognition, and the listener right now has no name recognition. So it's kind of like trying to start a business when the established business is in place. So what do you need when you start a business? You need startup money. You need people out there to give you $100,000 to get your campaign going so people can know your name, and whereas the person you're challenging already has that startup money. So if you restrict the spending, if you say, hey, I'm going to put a regulation on both me as the incumbent and the challenger to my position, and we can't raise more than $2,700 at a time, well, that's going to hurt the challenger more. And that's what we've seen since campaign finance laws came in. We've seen in many ways on the floor of the Senate, you have senators having said this, for the purpose why I'm passing this law is to shut down speech that's critical of me. And then we see an extremely high retention rate of incumbents. It's almost impossible to get an incumbent out of office. And if you really want to talk about what corruption is, it's government in this town, the swamp that never, ever gets drained because it's almost impossible to raise enough money to get someone out of office.
Wow. Yeah. I really, really appreciate those points, and I hadn't thought of that. I've talked about the power of incumbency before, but never in the context of the campaign finance laws and the limits on giving. But you're exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of businesses or successful business owners who see what's going on in Congress, and they might want to finance one of those and give a big lump sum, but they can't do that. I've never thought of it before, but you're exactly right. That really would. And it makes sense, Trevor, because Congress has such a terrible approval rating, and yet we reelect. Well, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a very, very high percentage every 2 years.
95%, 90 to 95%.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. It makes our political discourse stagnant. You can't have people come in and shake it up. And when you do have people come and shake it up, it's people like Donald Trump or Ross Perot back in the day who are wealthy, who can spend their own money on their campaign, but they can't give that money to someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and certainly Donald Trump, President Trump, it definitely makes your point, because he is, if anything, I mean, say what you want, he is anti-status quo. He has shaken things up. I mean, the Republican establishment will now actually, disagree with the president now. You know what I mean? You used to never see that. He's in. Obviously, the Democrats can't stand him, but I mean, I think what he's doing is fantastic personally. But that makes your point. Here's a guy who's not the status quo, and you see how he's shaking things up, and it's because he was able to control the amount of money he personally put in his campaign. And anyway, I'll give you the last word. Trevor Burrus with the Cato Institute. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that you want to shake it up, and it also applies to the left. If you're trying to communicate to the left, one person who shook things up in 1968 was Eugene McCarthy, who got big campaign donations before they were made illegal, and he was able to challenge Lyndon Johnson for the Democratic primary and on the issue of the Vietnam War, and change the political debate in Washington. Campaign finance laws really clamp down on the diversity of that debate and the ability to get this town changed over to be more representative of the people.
Wow. I appreciate it. Trevor Burrus, Cato Institute scholar. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thanks for having me.
All righty. Folks, this is Conduit News Radio, and we're going to take a break. I want to remind you the podcast of this is available. If you missed the first hour, just go to conduitnews.com. You can click on podcast or video archives, facebook.com/Conduit News, or go over to YouTube and subscribe to Conduit News. Click the little bell for notifications. We want to get enough subscribers so we get discriminated against because we're conservative. That's our goal. We will We'll see you on the other side of this break, folks. Don't go anywhere.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment. From the beginning, authors of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers advocated the general election of people who possess wisdom, discernment, and loyalty to their constituents. Why? The people expect their representatives to uphold their promises. The representatives recognize the honor bestowed by these constituents. Advancement comes from their followers, not the government. Elections are frequent, and accountability is a compelling factor to loyalty and support from constituents. From a July 5th, 1929 speech by President Calvin Coolidge. This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
It's always great to have you on, and I look forward to doing it again here in a couple of weeks.
Let me throw this out real quick to farmers that are listening. I tell you, it's not lost on me or anybody else the fact that U.S. farmers, Arkansas farmers in particular, are stepping up to do their part to reclaim American sovereignty in the global marketplace. So while we endure some short-term discomfort, the long-term payoff is going to be much more beneficial. So I just want to commend Arkansas farmers for their willingness to really take it for the team here, broadly speaking. And they know what I'm talking about, and you know what I'm talking about. It's uncomfortable right now, but in the long term, we're going to be much better off. And for those farmers that understand that, I appreciate that, and we're working hard to address this. But
bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to again thank the Cato Institute for getting us some great guests on this week. Really do appreciate it. That was Trevor Burrus, really shedding a lot of light on this concept, this false concept of dark money. Also, this earlier in the week when we got to interview Ilya Shapiro, that was fantastic about the Supreme Court and the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. And so that's been very, very good. Later in the week, I guess tomorrow on the program, we'll be talking with Mr. Keith Crooks. He is the proprietor of 5 Star Painting, and Keith will be on the program for our Small Business Spotlight. So you want to make sure you tune into that. That's tomorrow at 7:33. Going to get to hear from an Arkansas businessman about his story and his business, and really excited about that. Then later in the week on Friday, we'll be talking with Mr. David Ferguson, the former head of the Bureau of Legislative Research. He wrote an article critiquing an opinion from Attorney General Leslie Rutledge on gun rights, and it's really a great article. It's up at conduitforaction.org if you want to take a look. Also, I saw where David Ferguson has an article over at Talk Business about, if the Senate is really serious about streaming their sessions and transparency. That's good to see that getting out and to other people, because the Senate, if you're going to do this, you need to understand that the people are losing faith. I mean, this is what I'm saying to these prosecutors. I am publicly pleading. I mean, I don't talk to these U.S. attorneys here in Arkansas in the Eastern Western District, but, I mean, the people have lost faith in their government. I mean, the reason we're talking about streaming in the Senate right now, we wouldn't be talking about this if Rusty Cranford hadn't pled guilty. And matter of fact, Rusty Cranford, was being he didn't make bail because he tried to have a guy killed, according to the government. They said they have it on tape, and so he was held. And if you're held for a month or two, well, now you start wanting to sing like a canary. We wouldn't even know. I don't think we'd be talking about streaming in the Senate and transparency if it wasn't for Rusty Cranford pleading guilty. And by the way, he pleads guilty in a Missouri court. So please, U.S. attorneys, with all due respect, we have senators being accused of taking money who are attorneys who for no legal fees. For no legal work, just retainers so they pass bills for their clients. And there needs to be retribution. There needs to be indictments. These senators need to be tried, and we need to see if they're guilty. And I just am pleading with you. The U.S. attorneys, please, will you help us as the people of Arkansas? Will you help restore the faith that we have in our elected officials? We've already got a bunch of convictions, but it's much deeper than that, and everybody knows it's much deeper than that. I mean, how many indictments? Senator Jeremy Hutchinson is like the reoccurring character in a Marvel movie. He's in all these indictments. He's named as Senator A, Senator A, Senator A. He's like Nick Fury at the end of every Marvel movie. There's Nick Fury at the end of the credits explaining to the superhero what their next mission is. That's like who Jeremy Hutchinson is in all these indictments. Senator C. No, it's now time for Senator C to make his appearance in this guilty plea. I mean, come on. At what point are we like, come on, Arkansas U.S. attorneys, come on, guys, let's get together. Please, will you restore the faith in government? I mean, I am a limited government conservative. I would love to talk about sound tax policy. I would love to talk about shrinking government. I would love to talk about performance-based budgeting, activities-based costing, all of these great policies that Arkansas doesn't have. We can't talk about that because right now we're just begging for honest government. I'd rather have an honest Democrat that's, admits his socialist policies than I would these, crooked Republicans. Wouldn't you? Because then we can actually have a debate. All right. What time is it? All right, we're got to wrap up the show here. I want to remind you, folks, over at conduitnews.com, you can get the podcast, you can get the video archive, facebook.com/conduitnews, you can get the video there as well, and you can continue to comment. I've noticed this is happening. People are watching this program after it airs, mostly on Facebook, and they add to the comments. So you've got the live comments, which is a trove of comments every day, and then you've got the non-live comments when they're going back and listening to in the recording. Just want you to know, when you do that, we are getting those comments, and we appreciate them. We appreciate your participation. We're going to wrap things up. We're going to be back here tomorrow with bells on at 6:05. Do not miss it. Arkansas, thank you so much for listening. Thank you to the great stations across the state that are carrying this program. Be safe.